Hey lifers, Dustin here, and today let's talk a little bit about a college football chaos theory that I've kind of conjured up. If you look at the helmets that I have right here, it may give a little bit of indication. I'm going to give you a scenario right now that could or could not happen, but it could, but it probably won't, but it could, that could make this your 2017 college football playoff. Now, if we were to look at this logically, right? Okay? In the 3 years that we've had the playoff, which isn't very many so far, we've never had a two-loss team. So the way I've set up my Eliminator series is that two-loss teams are essentially out of the playoff, and until a two-loss team finds its way to sneak in there, I will continue to think as such. So what if we get everybody in the country to have two losses by the end of the season, except for these four teams? Wouldn't you think that would be enough for them to put all four of these teams in the playoff, potentially to face each other again? Well, I doubt it, but it is an interesting little thought experiment. So we are done with 8 weeks of the college football season, and spoiler alert, in case you've missed the Eliminator video that I put up earlier today, just a little while ago, this is what we're left with. We have 18 teams: Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Miami, Michigan State, NC State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Penn State, USF, UCF, TCU, Virginia Tech, Washington, Washington State, and Wisconsin. What I'm about to present, which would absolutely blow up the college football playoff and might be one of those turning points to actually get us to an 18 playoff, is a perfect storm. Everything has to happen exactly the way that I say, probably, in order for this to happen. And even then, they may still disregard it and it may not happen. I don't know. But I think this is the best theory to get not only two teams from the same conference in the, Eliminator, in the college football playoff, which we have never had before, but to get two conferences with two teams into the playoff. Now we have 18 undefeated teams, and I want to go ahead and start this off by saying UCF and USF, well, I love you, and your undefeated streak is greatly appreciated in the college football world. Neither of you have probably a realistic chance of getting into the playoff based on the opponents you've played, the Power 5 teams, and one of you still has to beat the other. One of you is probably going to be the New Year's 6 representative, but I'm going to go ahead and cut you out of this. I'm very sorry. Now, this whole charade that I'm about to say is going to be possible because of two teams, and that is Notre Dame and Stanford. So what I'm going to do now is go week by week and show you how there could be enough chaos in the college football season, in my humble opinion, to possibly make this your college football playoff top 4 teams. Starting this upcoming weekend, we have 3 big games that we need to keep an eye on: NC State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oklahoma State, West Virginia. One-loss NC State travels out to one-loss Notre Dame, and the Irish win, giving NC State their second loss of the season, thus eliminating the Wolfpack. Penn State, the higher-ranked team, travels out to Columbus and wins. They win the Ohio State revenge game, and they give Ohio State their second loss of the season, eliminating the Buckeyes. Oklahoma State travels out to West Virginia and loses. Will Grier has another 5-touchdown performance, his third in a row, I think. And the Mountaineers upset Oklahoma State, eliminating the Cowboys. So now coming out of week 9, you have NC State, Ohio State, and Oklahoma State, all with 2 losses. Move to next week, November 4th. Now you have 2-loss NC State hosting 1-loss Clemson, and a still banged up Tigers team who barely pulled off a victory against Georgia Tech at home at night loses to NC State in a hostile atmosphere, a game that might actually be game day game if we're not careful. And Oklahoma State, fresh off their loss against West Virginia, hosts Oklahoma in Bedlam and upsets the Sooners, giving the Sooners their second loss of the season, eliminating them. So now we have Clemson is eliminated, Oklahoma is eliminated, both with 2 losses, and Virginia Tech travels out to Miami, who's undefeated, and gives the Hurricanes their first loss of the season, leaving Virginia Tech and Miami as the only one-loss teams left in the ACC. The weekend of November 11th, Veterans Day, are 4 really big games, kicking off Friday, November 10th, when Washington travels out to Stanford, and loses, giving the Huskies their second loss on the season. Notre Dame makes the trip all the way down to Miami in a convicts versus Catholics rematch game, as it always is whenever these two meet up. We always bring that game up. But in this one, just like in the original, Notre Dame gets the best of the Hurricanes and wins, meaning that Miami, who had been, 8-0, 7-0, now have lost 2 straight games and are thus eliminated. Notre Dame is vaulted after beating NC State and Miami into the top 5 in the country, with one loss being to Georgia. Ohio State, who just got eliminated by Penn State 2 weeks earlier, hosts Michigan State and beats Sparty at home, thus eliminating Michigan State and meaning that Penn State and Wisconsin are the only 2 Big Ten teams left, both undefeated. Undefeated TCU makes a trip down to Norman, or I guess up to Norman from them, and they lose. Baker Mayfield is too much to overcome, and TCU falls for the first time this season in Norman. Surprisingly, November 18th, or that weekend of, doesn't produce any games meaningful for this conversation, meaning going into the last weekend of the regular season, we have 4 undefeated teams in Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, and Wisconsin, and 4 one-loss teams in Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, TCU, and Washington State. In the Apple Cup, Washington did what it did last year when this was expected to be a really close, interesting battle, and they beat Washington State, giving Wazoo their second loss of the season and eliminating them. And just like they did 2 years ago, Stanford beats Notre Dame and keeps them from the college football playoff, giving them their second loss. So we have officially set the stage for Championship Saturday, December 2nd. Well, December 1st is the Pac-12 Championship, but that doesn't really matter for this case. December 2nd is Championship Saturday, and you have undefeated number 1 Alabama against number 3 Georgia. You have number 2 Penn State undefeated against undefeated number 4 Wisconsin. 2-loss Oklahoma State against 1-loss TCU for the Big 12 Championship, and 1-loss Virginia Tech against 2-loss NC State for the ACC Championship. We'll work backwards a little bit here. Let's say NC State upsets Virginia Tech, who's probably in the top 7 at this point. They upset the Hokies, ruining their chances, giving them their second loss of the season, and eliminating them from the college football playoff. 1-loss TCU, who beat Oklahoma State earlier in the season, loses to the Cowboys. Oklahoma State barely beats TCU, giving them their second loss. Every team in the ACC and the Big 12 and the Pac-12 now has at least 2 losses. Now, for the undefeated Big Ten Championship and the undefeated SEC Championship, this is where things get a little bit tricky because I think specific teams have to win here. I think in the SEC Championship, Georgia has to beat Alabama. I think if Alabama beats Georgia, everybody will just put Alabama in and say no other SEC team should probably get in. So I think Georgia needs to beat Alabama in overtime or a really close game or a last-second touchdown or field goal. They have to beat Alabama really close. Are you telling me that the voters are going to keep Alabama, who was number 1 the entire season, out because they lost to number 3 Georgia on a last-second field goal? No way. Absolutely no way, in my opinion. Especially with every other team in the country having at least 2 losses, save for maybe a USF or a UCF, which again, sorry guys that you're not really a part of this conversation. In the Big Ten, you have undefeated Wisconsin and undefeated Penn State, and I think you have to get Wisconsin to beat Penn State. I think if Penn State wins, that'll be enough to actually eliminate Wisconsin from the conversation because they didn't play Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan State in the regular season. They did play Michigan in the next to last week, but I just don't think that their schedule is going to hold up to the way Penn State's did, having to go into Columbus to play Ohio State. I just don't know if that's going to be enough. So I think Wisconsin has to beat Penn State again in a really, really close game. So on December 3rd, Sunday, December 3rd, when the College Football Playoff makes their announcement as to who the 2017 College Football Playoff is going to pit it against, who are they going to pick? They're going to pick number 1 Georgia, obviously. They're 13-0. They beat Alabama in the SEC Championship game. And number 2 Wisconsin, who beat number 2 Penn State in the Big Ten Championship game. And number 3, they're going to put the Crimson Tide because they were number 1 all season long and they fell in a heartbreaking close game against Georgia in the state of Georgia. Nick Saban losing to his protege Kirby Smart. first time he ever lost to a protege, and Penn State, who was in the top 5 pretty much all season long. They beat Ohio State, they beat Michigan, they beat Michigan State. This is what the playoff would look like. The first round in the Sugar Bowl would be Georgia versus Penn State, and the Rose Bowl would be Wisconsin versus Alabama, with the winners meeting in the national championship game. At least, I think that could happen. So there you guys have it, a quick little essay on how I think things could go to blow up the college football playoff and change every single thing we think we know about what the committee looks for in the playoff teams. And this doesn't necessarily have to be the matchup in order to blow up the college football playoff. Imagine if a 2-loss Notre Dame gets in without a conference. Imagine if a 2-loss Big 12 team gets in without having divisions, right? That would be pretty weird. I don't know. I know that there's going to be hesitation from the committee to put in 2 members of the same conference, let alone 2 members of 2 conferences to be the entire playoff. Especially when there is a 50-50 shot that you're going, I guess 25%? I don't know how math works, but there's a pretty high likelihood you're going to get a rematch in the national championship game. I don't think that's something that they want. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think this is actually a doable feat? This is just kind of a fever dream that I had the other day that I've decided to actually make a video about as a way to figure out if we could blow up the college football playoff. And let me know down below any other ways you can see the playoff being disrupted from the way we view it right now. And do you think this would be enough? Let me get it. There you go. Do you think this would be enough to get an 8-team playoff? I don't know. Be interesting. Let me know what you think down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can also click on the circle right there in order to subscribe or watch any of the other videos over there to the right that YouTube has suggested for you. And as always, until next time. Thought experiment. So we are done with 8 weeks of the college football season, and spoiler alert in case you've missed the Eliminator video that I put up earlier today, just a little while ago. This is what we're left with. We have 18 teams: Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Miami, Michigan State, NC State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Penn State, USF, UCF, TCU. This, your 2017 college football playoff. Now, if we were to look at this logically, right? Okay? In the 3 years that we've had the playoff, which isn't very many so far, we've never had a 2-loss team. So the way I've set up my Eliminator series is that 2-loss teams are essentially out of the playoff, and until a 2-loss team finds its way to sneak in there, I will continue to think as such. So what if we get everybody in the country to have 2 losses by the end of the season, except for these 4 teams? Wouldn't you think that would be enough for them to put all 4 of these teams in the playoff, potentially to face each other again? Well, I doubt it, but it is an interesting little thought. Hey lifers, Dustin here, and today let's talk a little bit about a college football chaos theory that I've kind of conjured up. If you look at the helmets that I have right here, it may give a little bit of indication. I'm going to give you a scenario right now that could or could not happen, but it could, but it probably won't, but it could, that could make you Virginia Tech, Washington, Washington State, and Wisconsin. What I'm about to present, which would absolutely blow up the college football playoff and might be one of those turning points to actually get us to an 8-team playoff, is a perfect storm. Everything has to happen exactly the way that I say probably